Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, and I've been researching the afterlife now 26 years. I'm the author of the book We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, our home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find our free Sunday gathering, inspirational service, 2 p.m. New York time, but we're global on Zoom. There's a Medium demonstration included. Plus, we have Medium classes, a Facebook group. You can listen to past episodes and so much more. That's at wedon'tdie.com. Now, on to the show. If you've been on social media lately and you're interested in the afterlife, chances are you've seen something pop up about a brand new film called After Death that is coming to nearly 2,000 theaters, October 27th, 2023. Now, if you're watching or listening to this after that, fear not, it's probably on demand somewhere and it's going to be a big hit, so you'll want to keep listening. The film After Death is a gripping feature film that explores what happens when we die, based on real near-death experiences conveyed by scientists, authors, and survivors. You can find out more about the film and where to watch it, because now you can get tickets for it, by searching After Death film anywhere on social media, or even easier than that, go to angel.com/after death. Our guests today are the director of the film, Stephen Gray, and producer, Jens Jacob. The film After Death, like I said, is a big deal. And I am thrilled to say, Stephen and Jens, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Well, thanks so much for having us on, Sandra. We're really excited.
Yeah, an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. First, let's see, where does one begin? Because I'm so excited. I'm like a kid with a giant Christmas present right now, because this is my thing, and our listeners and viewers know it as well. But maybe first, let's just say, where are you guys located? Where are you sitting
So
right now in the world?
I'm based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Currently, I'm in San Jose, California.
San Jose, very nice. And I am just south of Boston, Massachusetts, in a little town in Rhode Island,
Oh, nice.
USA. Okay, so now it's a big film. It's coming soon. But where did this idea begin? Stephen, is that with you?
Yeah. So really the whole idea for the film kind of started born out of loss. So I've been a filmmaker for about 15 years now, and kind of mostly in the commercial space, a lot of commercials up in Canada here. And but a number of years ago, my brother-in-law was actually tragically killed by a drunk driver. And going through that kind of, immediate sudden loss really kind of caused me to ask a lot of questions. And so I actually grew up going to church all my life. Was raised in a Christian home, and consider myself a Christian kind of growing up in my young kind of youth and all that. And but right here at this moment was kind of this crossroads. And I don't know, I just kind of had to let go of the idea that there could even be a God, or let alone heaven or any kind of afterlife, because for me it was kind of, life was chaos all of a sudden, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. My brother-in-law was he was such a good person, and he also he believed in God, and all of a sudden it's like, what's the point? He's just gone, and it's just kind of chaos. So anyway, it was a short period after that where some people started recommending some of these stories of people who had clinically died and then had these experiences and came back. I want to say there was a few books that were given to me, and I'm not a huge reader, especially like back then. I wasn't a massive reader, and so I thought the idea was interesting, but honestly, I just kind of was like, is it wishful thinking still, without having read the stories. And it was actually it sounds a little bit strange, but be perfect for you, Sandra, in terms of audio. I got I got given a CD actually of I can't remember where it came from, but it was a recording of a few people who had near-death experiences. And the first person I heard was, I think, Dr. Richard Eby's story. He's this guy who had fallen like 2 stories from a building, and cracked his head open on the sidewalk. And the things he was starting to describe about what he saw in that kind of next conscious experience was so detailed and so articulate. And honestly, yeah, this is the first time I ever heard something like that. And I'm thinking, what on earth is a doctor doing talking about this? Right? And is he a doctor, right? So and of course, the first thing I did was just Google everything I could about him and trying to look him up and, thinking, I don't know, is he just calling himself a doctor? And sure enough, he's a medical doctor. And this, apparently did happen. And it's quite, an amazing story. One thing led to another. That definitely got me hooked. I consumed something like 30 books, I think, immediately after that. My wife, my mother-in-law as well. We just went down a road of, kind of getting into every kind of book we can get our hands on. And yeah, there's a lot of different stories out there. I think for me, though, I just I needed to get back past some skepticism, I guess, at that early stage. So I was gravitating more towards the stories where there's probably going to be a lot of evidence around what they're describing. And I know that's not everyone's story, and it's just because of circumstances, not as it turns out, depending on where someone dies or how they die is kind of indicative of how much evidence there's going to be or not. So there's a few stories that for me that kind of rose to the top, and I just thought, okay, I'm a filmmaker. And I just want to, I'm curious how many movies there are on this or how many documentaries there are on this. And as I started to explore, it's like, well, at that time, I think it was like 2013 when I started getting this idea. And there really wasn't much out there. There's a few, but not a ton. I mean, I did watch everything I could, and I bought every DVD and whatever obscure kind of older thing I could get my hands on. But yeah, it was just, I guess the quality and different things like that just wasn't speaking to me. And I believe these people's stories in the books, but in the film format, it just didn't kind of come through in that same way. So I just kind of thought, well, I guess I'll go make one. And I don't have the means to make a full feature film at that time. But what I could do was I could save up and figure out how to, in a scrappy way, tell one person's story. And in my head, I just thought, if that's all ends up being, so be it. But I had this idea always to make a feature documentary. I thought the chorus of kind of so many different stories, because of these, 30 some books that I read, was really interesting. Like how many of these stories, combined together, I think tells a bigger, more powerful story than a singular story. Because it's just like, what is going on here? And I think there's power in sort of like testimony after testimonies. Like so many people. It's just like this can't be avoided. You can't ignore it. So anyway, I went out and told one story in 2017. Captain Dale Black, he's this guy who died in a plane crash, 1969. He hit a monument in Burbank, California, with two other pilots. And the one pilot was very clearly dead. No resuscitation ever could happen to that person. The other there was Dale and Chuck were both pilots that at first didn't have any vital signs, but then I think it was 16 minutes or something later they kind of showed signs of movement or vitals. So they were shoved into the same ambulance, brought to an emergency hospital, and they began an operation on both. They lost Chuck, and they managed to barely kind of keep Dale alive. And, he didn't share his experience for so many years. He actually kept him to himself because he felt that this is sacred. This is something that was really just meant for him. But fortunately for me, he eventually did publish a book, and I read it, and I just thought, okay, here's a plane crash. Again, there's going to be an investigation. There's obviously going to be some kind of documentation of a plane crash. And there should be in that documentation something at least alludes to, how dramatic this plane crash was and is it survivable or not and all that. And turns out, the next day after his plane crash made the headlines of the LA Times because at that time, 1969, it was very rare, or it was a big spectacle for any plane crash, even one his size. Was a 10-passenger plane. Today, maybe less so of a thing, but at that time, pretty special. And so it made the headlines of the LA Times, as well as basically every single newspaper in Southern California at that time. So there was a lot of newspaper documentation about the plane crash. And actually, there was a really famous LA Times photographer that happened to be in a helicopter, circling the place. I think it was like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes after the crash itself, after some people started gathering around. And he actually took some beautiful, film photographs of the crash, which is, wild. So all of that documentation, I think, helped kind of paint a picture that, yeah, this plane crash happened, for sure. And it was at least, clear that two other pilots did die, could not be brought back, and Dale did become the sole survivor. This is all published. And so and then I went and told his story, one person's story, made a 10-minute film, not knowing kind of where it would go, hoping that it would go somewhere, but not knowing for sure. 2017, when it got released, it got a fair bit of attention. Kind of to my surprise, I wasn't sure how people were going to react to it. Honestly, I didn't even know if they'd believe the story or whatever. I just made it to the best of my ability. And I think it was in that same year, Jen's like, so Cypher Studios had put out a feature-length film called The Heart of Man, which had released in theaters. And it's also a documentary, but I use that term loosely because it's half of it's a narrative film. It's beautifully shot. It's really also a really difficult subject that not a lot of people want to talk about. So in a similar way, I thought, how on earth did these guys pull this off? This beautiful film, and it's really done in the same kind of approach and style that I wanted to do with this feature. So I just reached out to them and, shared who I am and what I'm doing. And Jens can probably tell the rest of the story.
Yeah,
but
let's talk to Jens. First of all, yeah, how did you meet? You pick up the phone, or somehow you got connected through
I just
Steve?
reached out.
Steve actually just sent out a cold email to me, I believe, and yeah, this was around 2017, I think 2017 or 2018, and we get a handful of these like ever so often, so you take them all for a grain of salt, but you want to explore and see what people are pitching you. And so thankfully Steve was smart that he had a video or like a short, something that kind of was just more than the idea. And we were just blown away by the short. The short was so beautifully done, so tasteful, and I don't think I'd ever seen anybody quite depict the afterlife or heaven or any of these like concepts in this way. So I thought it was just a very unique expression of that. And we hopped on a call with Steve, heard his story, and really believed that there was something bigger here. To his point, he had a vision for a feature, and we had even played around with the series to see if it could, there's just so many stories, as you've done 400 of these episodes. There's just countless stories out there, and we just thought, oh, this would be so great for it to Steve's point, to be shared in a more visual way, because everything else has been either like books or articles and things like that. So it was quite the challenge and the feat to try to depict the afterlife. Obviously there's not much to go by other than what people are talking about inside, but visually it was very unique, and I would say innovative in the way that we've had to think about it. We kind of stayed away from what I think has been plagued with cheesiness in other like former adaptations of stuff like this. It kind of goes clouds and cherubs, and we really loved Steve's take on it. And not that it's so different in the sense of like what people are saying. He just took that and interpreted it in a way that actually made sense, I think, which to me was this cosmic kind of expression of the afterlife. So it was just very beautifully depicted. And yeah, so we signed up to be the production company behind it. My business partner Jason Paymer and myself were the producers, and along with an amazing team. I mean, we've had hundreds of people touch this film. It was just an incredible cast and crew that all signed up to be a part of it. And yeah, we thankfully right around the time that we were finishing it, we submitted it to Angel, and they loved it. The Guild loved it, which is their group of supporters, and found ourselves this year with a huge theatrical release on the tail end of COVID and all this stuff that was preventing a lot of us from like working and doing this. And so it's been a long time coming. It's been, a little over 5 years now, and for Steve, many more years. But we're so proud of what we've been able to accomplish with the limited resources that we had, and yeah, very excited for people to experience it on the big screen.
I can't wait. Jens, let me ask you, when this project came about, what were your thoughts about the afterlife?
Yeah, similarly to Steve, I had grown up Christian, but even then, I would say it's the thing that I doubted the most of what it would look like to see the afterlife. And in a weird way, I don't think I ever even doubted that there's a place where like maybe there's like a creator or God or whatever is. I just doubted this idea that we go there afterwards. I don't know why. That was just kind of like my inherent doubt. And so but I always struggled with the topic of death and just what it means to die. And even further than that, non-existing. I don't know why. It was just such a deep concept for me that I couldn't fully grapple with. And so I've always questioned this particular topic. And it was timely. I mean, we to spend years of our lives, you really have to dedicate, quite a bit of your energy, resource, and your talent to something, and because it takes years. It's not like days or weeks or something like that. So you have to make sure that you're fully on board with the subject or the topic or the whatever it might be. And I just knew everybody struggles with this question. There's not a single person that hasn't thought about it, whether or not you believe it. You think about it, you grapple with it. And for me, I kind of wanted it to be a student of the project where I went through the journey myself to understand the facts, the stories, what this was about. And so that was a beautiful place to be. And I love that about documentaries because it's such a beautiful mechanism for how you can learn. I wasn't really great at school, but I loved learning through documentaries and visual, like, videos and things like that. So being a student of this project as well as a producer was an incredible experience because it really was a sponge in this season, letting the interviews, letting the facts, letting the cases kind of speak for themselves. And then and Steve brought a plethora of knowledge and history and research that he had done prior to this. So we were very lucky that we had, or at least Cypher had, that to start with. So yeah, I mean, definitely was maybe not as much of a believer at the beginning of the project, was probably the resident skeptic in the group, and found myself reaching my own conclusion through the film, which I hope everybody does. Regardless of if you believe it or not, there's something I think that you'll get out of this film. And that's the beauty of the way that this story was told. So yeah.
I'm excited. Before we get into who's in the film and kind of some of the things that happen, can you talk a little bit about Angel Studios? Because when I first clicked on that link, I thought, oh, this is a fundraiser. What's happening? And I just kept watching the numbers go up and go up. And it's like, you guys have a commitment to be in 2,000 theaters across Canada and the United States. And I know our international friends, it'll make it there to you soon. But talk to, what is Angel and how did that come about? Because they've done some big films.
Yeah, and actually, even when we started this process, they weren't really even on the map. They're very new to the scene, and which is very exciting about the innovative approach that they've taken to what it looks like to distribute film and TV. So traditionally, it's studios, maybe one or two or a handful of people at those studios that are decision makers in content, and it's a hit or miss. They're kind of hoping that they just gamble. If 10 projects come out, one will be an ultra success, not 8 will fail, maybe another 1 or 2 will break even. And, it kind of either went that way where it's just a group of people that might be out of touch with culture making decisions, or algorithmic content, which is like Netflix, where they're just looking at the numbers to just see, oh, okay, we're going to just push out this type of content, but also you just get flooded with a lot of garbage. So this is kind of like the two places that you've kind of had traditionally. And Angel kind of took a model where they got a tremendous success from doing a crowd crowdfunding for a series called The Chosen, and out of that they allowed those individuals, thousands of people that had donated, to become stakeholders in the project and to really help propel and promote what they would call amplifying light. That's kind of the mantra of the type of content that they want to put out. And to their credit, I mean, they really energized thousands of mini marketers and promoters and people that were just very invested, because they put not only time, money, they their love, their support. They were just a part of the journey with a lot of these filmmakers. So they just built this really great community that now the guild is what they call it, has I think more than 100,000 members that are involved, that get to be a part of picking what the next angel project is. And they have so it's all based on what the people want. They don't make any decisions outside of the guild. The guild is what the primary decision maker is. So if it gets a certain amount of votes, it goes through the pipeline, if you will, to then become the next angel project. And in that, you also get to be an investor, whether that's so we did a P&A investment, which is a marketing investment. So people were able to, since the film was already done, they got to vote on the final film and then participate in the investment in our marketing, which was an incredible experience. I think within was it 100 hours, Steve?
100 hours, yeah.
Within 100 hours, we raised $1.25 million, which is unheard of for an independent filmmaker, with our, resources. This was an unbelievable experience for us, and is what really propelled, because of how well that they did with The Chosen, and then also Sound of Freedom, which, over the summer was a huge beat out most blockbuster movies, including what is it? The
Indiana Jones,
Mission
Impossible,
and Mission Impossible. Yeah. Which, it's unheard of. So what they've been able to do, and again, I think it just comes from the support of the people, and we are now a benefactor of that, where we're able to work with this community to get this film out. And they really saw fit that we would be the next, big release out of Angel. And I think it has a lot to do with how just interested this community, and I think largely the world, is about near-death experiences. There's so many of them that happen now, and you hear stories here and there, but I don't think anybody's ever quite put it together like this and able to beautifully package the facts, the stories, what currently exists from the NDE community now.
I know people in our life after death community are so excited about it. Some of the research that I've done, depends on what study, but there's over 70% of people believe in the afterlife, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
But probably 100% of people are afraid of what people think if they find out they believe in the afterlife. So there's this inherent fear that we all have. And I had it. I was like a nasty skeptic. So I'm the perfect messenger for this, because I didn't believe in it. Took a lot of convincing. And now I'm the biggest supporter of sharing what I know about the afterlife and bringing these great conversations. But I think what's happening, and what I feel happening, even within myself, is people want to share what they love. They want to share their beliefs. They want to share the signs that they've received. They want to share the books that they've read. And as human beings, we're afraid of what people may think. I was petrified when my book came out. I thought I was going to lose my family, my friends, and my business community. I thought they were going to think I was insane to have a book called We Don't Die. And it didn't happen that way. People were excited, interested, and asked me questions. And, I get a random person that just wanted to pray for me that I'm, in the devil's work or something. Okay, thanks. But the thing is, with this film, it's like giving permission for people to openly talk about it. And I think what's going to happen is, when people start talking, they're going to realize that their friends believe in it. They just haven't said anything. And I think there's a real potential for this film to be the catalyst for just everybody talking about the afterlife, whether they believe in it or not, but reasons to believe, whether it's near-death experiences or some of the science things that are happening or some of the doctors involved. But I'm so proud of you guys, Stephen, for having that vision and going for it. And it sounds like it's 10 years in the making to this. I mean, it really could be that explosion that's going to not only let people be open about it, but let's face it, we've all had grief, and there is nothing worse than having a loved one pass. And to just have an opportunity to have some hope, hear these stories, come up with your own conclusions, like you said. But then something magical happens, I think, when anybody starts researching the afterlife. It's like, well, what else is there? Well, who am I? And, you might have psychic experiences and things. So kudos to you guys for following your dream.
Thank you, Sandra. I mean, it's true what you're saying. I think we uniquely have this ability to help shape culture in terms of a movie about NDEs has not gotten this wide of a release prior. So this is like a huge step forward for this. And I would also like to believe that it's extremely validating for the people that have had NDEs. And I think it's going to be a really cool way for, if you did experience this or you do question it and you can't openly talk about it, to be able to invite people into the conversation by like as easy as saying, hey, come watch this movie with me, is such an easier way to digest it, to feel like you can talk about it, to feel validated. So we encourage everybody to kind of take the skeptics, the skeptic in your family or the skeptic, in your group, to a film like this.
Yeah, I think that this film is like one of the perfect kind of conversation starters. I mean, especially for someone that, definitely hasn't kind of given a thought to that there's something after. I mean, I think of even my neighbors here, where I live, and some conversations we've had about, obviously the course of making this film, even there's interest, but there's a few of them that just, I mean, a lot of my friends too that just don't subscribe to that there's anything after. It's just kind of like that's just wishful thinking. And I think this film does a really good job of not hitting anyone over the head by any means, but just letting the stories speak for themselves. I mean, I will say also, not everyone in the film even believes in life after death. We don't assume kind of anything of the audience, and we definitely don't want to subject them to like, this is what it is and you need to believe it and like that's it. But you watch the stories and you see the research, and and the hope is that you kind of come to conclusion. But it's for sure a conversation starter. Like, it'll get someone, I think, 90% there if they're considering something after. And then I don't know who I think it's just like you're gonna have all kinds of really interesting conversations after having watched this film.
One of the cool things too is kind of the way that the story is told and the journey that you go through is through a skeptic. His name is Dr. Michael Sabom, and that he takes you through that whole journey of every question you're hoping to ask. He's asking it in real time so it's very I want to say refreshing, because you don't you don't feel like, like I wish they just said this or asked that. So it's a beautiful, I think, way or a door into the conversation as well, because it really does ask some of the hard questions. And also I think it's this perfect merriment of the real stories, which tugs at your heart, but then also the facts and the science and the scientific community that's kind of done a lot of research into this. So it does this beautiful merriment of both the heart and the mind in terms of how you enter the conversation.
I love it. And you don't want to insult anybody's intelligence. Younger me, like I said, was so opinionated. You couldn't tell me that this stuff was real no matter what. And it, I woke up in the mid 90s with a huge fear of dying. Where it came from, I don't know, but it was there. And so it just had me start secretly searching. First I grew up Catholic, great stories, wasn't sure, didn't calm that fear. And it wasn't until really getting into not just near death experiences, but taking a course in mediumship and electronic voice phenomena. And I had some holy cow experiences that really tipped the scales to me that this is real. However, I wasn't going to tell anybody about it. Again, that fear, because I used to badmouth people that talked about this until my dad got sick. And 5 months later, he passed. And I dug into the world of grief, and I never knew really what happens to somebody when they grieve and how we can hit rock bottom. And sometimes grief is what takes us out of life. We want to check out when our loved one dies. Some people even take that action. So I just felt like I had this moral responsibility to share what I know about grief. And so, I'll be a big champion to get this out and let, like you said, skeptics form their own decisions. And it may just plant a seed for some people, and they might get a little older and go, oh my gosh, there is something to this. Or people might start having, we all have these weird psychic experiences. I like, how did that happen? To realize is that there's more to us than meets the eye. So it's told through the story of the skeptic, but let's talk about some of the people who are in the movie. I know I just cut and pasted this, but you talked about Captain Dale Black, author of Visiting Heaven, Don Piper, author of 90 Minutes in Heaven, Dr. Mary Neal, author of To Heaven and Back. She's a spine surgeon. John Burke, author of Imagine Heaven. Dr. Jeffrey Long, author of Evidence of the Afterlife, who just came out with, he's talking openly that after 5,000 near-death experiences that he's studied, he is 100% certain there is an afterlife. And of course, we all know Dr. Raymond Moody, author of Life After Life, and so many more, who coined the phrase near-death experiences. Plus, isn't there something like 14 people that you have within the film?
Yeah, I think we interviewed 14 people who made it into the film kind of one way or another. That doesn't include, we do have some sort of like archival as well, kind of mashed into the film, kind of show that, again, this is something that's been studied all around the world, not just here in North America.
So you're bringing in these people's stories? Oh, go ahead, Jens.
Oh, and I was going to say so many pre-interviews too. I mean, I wish we could have been able to include a lot more, but you have sometimes an hour and a half or, 2 hours to try to make the case or make the story. But yeah, there's just so many, just unbelievable the amount of stories there are.
Maybe with the digital copy, there could be some of that bonus
features.
Yeah.
So with the people I just mentioned and more, are they telling their story? I wish I got a bird's eye view, but I've got to wait till October 27th. But yeah, you've got some of the heavy hitters there, and these aren't, and nothing wrong with just the average man or woman that has a near-death experience, because it's real. But sometimes when you hear it's a scientist, it's a spine surgeon, medical doctor, pilot.
I think there's something really profound about, there's two things that kind of jumped out at us when we were kind of going through these different stories. We were kind of gravitating towards people that had something to lose in telling their story. And then, besides that, and sometimes coinciding with that, someone that, would maybe have changed their entire life around. I mean, even including like a profession or whatever, to move away from kind of selfish motive to selfless motive, and that it was serious enough and real enough that they would be willing to risk everything to change their life around and commit to that lifelong. And then to us, that was kind of like, man, there's got to be something real about that experience, because why on earth would you do that? I mean, if they're just making it up, that's a very strange move. I don't know there'd be like no logical purpose for it, right? So, yeah, there's several people in our film that had something to lose. I mean, Mary's story was that she's been depicted in a few other films. She was also in Netflix's Surviving Death. In our film, we go into a little more detail in her story, but she's, as a spine surgeon, and actually just like on a personal level, Mary's, pretty introverted. She likes to kind of keep to herself, and she wrote the book because she was told in her experience that she needs to tell her story. And it's a long story, but the writing of her book was a whole interesting endeavor as well. It wasn't so simple, and it didn't just come about, overnight. But she, she's kind of shy about sharing personal details of her story. She has a family. And she's a spine surgeon. She has her own medical practice out in Wyoming, and she's doing fine. She's happy as she is. She doesn't want to open herself up to the world and expose who she is and what she believes and what she experienced. But she's compelled to do that because she's told to tell her story. So she does. I mean, you have to remember doctors and nurses and stuff in her medical community. This is like, those are her colleagues, those are her friends. And, most of the people in that field, don't really believe in any of this kind of stuff, or at least don't, none of them are, advocating that we need to talk about this openly. It's just not a thing. And so for her to go and share that so openly is kind of she's risking her credentials or whatever. She's risking like who kind of her perception, right, of what people might think of her, and putting that at risk. She has nothing to gain by writing a book. She doesn't need the money. She's doing well as obviously as a doctor and with her own medical practice. And like I said, she's a private person. So it's like all these reasons to not tell her story. And yet she does. Now, she didn't have to change her career around. She's already doing work kind of in service to people and helping people, right? But there are some stories of, people who, let's say, were in the military and, they have a near-death experience and suddenly they can't use weapons anymore. Suddenly they can't continue missions anymore because this is like counter to what they experienced, counter to what they learned in their experience. I think one of the biggest transformations that we have in our films, not the only one, but is Howard Storm. He's kind of a bit of our hero story, and we just came to love Howard. And you never know how it's going to turn out. We interview all these people, like Jen's mentioned, and we just kind of like, we soak up kind of these stories as they come to us, and it's so amazing to be able to meet these different people and hear their experiences. But Howard just kind of like, there's something that was really just kind of grabbing us, pulling at our heartstrings. And yeah, it's amazing that somebody who's, he would call himself at the time kind of like a staunch atheist. Like he was very serious about being an atheist. And he also living, I think it was like 15, 20 years being an atheist. So this isn't just like a new thought or new idea or ideology or worldview. He's just like, there's nothing after. Confidently, to the point that he's on his deathbed and he's about to take his last breath because he's fighting to continue to breathing. So all he has to do is give up fighting, struggling really hard to keep breathing, and then he just says goodbye to his wife. And he knew that for himself when he says goodbye and then he slips to become unconscious, that's just going to be it. He's not going to exist anymore. And that's like for him serenity, that he doesn't have to exist anymore. And to his surprise, his conscious experience continues, and it's not like turning over in the bed and then he just kind of kept turning over. He was just all of a sudden up out of the bed in a different, like he thought at first a different place. And then he sees himself in the bed. And he knows right away that that's him, or that was him, but he kind of just like doesn't want to think about that, because it's like, then you gotta think about that. Maybe you're dead, right? So his whole story is fascinating in that his experience 180s his life. So who he was before wasn't just an atheist. There's nice people who are atheists around. He was, as he called it, like he lived his life, how do I jump on the shoulders of other people so I can get ahead of other people? Like it's dog eat dog. There's no point in life aside from getting status, being famous, getting as much money as you can, and at the expense of his relationship with his family and friends and that kind of stuff. Everything was kind of a backseat to like him and his focus and his career and his, desires in this world. And all of a sudden doesn't want to do that anymore, and his wife didn't recognize him. His kids didn't recognize him. And eventually, his story ends up pretty sad. Like his wife and kids leave him, and he, hadn't spoken to them for years after this whole incident. So And then he actually leaves his profession because he's surrounded by people that no one believes in this kind of stuff, and he just doesn't really feel like he's doing anything for people in the profession he was. And so he leaves it, takes a 90% pay cut, and becomes I think it was a pastor for shortly after, and then all the way till today, in service of others, and doing all kinds of mission trips, and working with like inner city people in the area he's in. That's his life, at the, like I say, at the expense of his family, everyone he's known, everything he was before is gone. But for him, it was all worth it because this is what he's supposed to do.
That's it.
And
Got to be
that's
true
it.
to who we are.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big change.
Oh,
So
and the film isn't all rainbows and butterflies because there is another side to near-death experiences. Some
mhm.
people have scary experiences. I think, we're not fully detached. So there's, as many different near-death experiences as there are human beings. We all have stuff still connected, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, but people who have near-death experiences, some of them really grieve because they'd rather be there than back here.
Yeah, most people that we talked to felt that way. I mean, that includes, there's some people that we, like Jen's mentioned, we kind of did some pre-interviews with a bunch of different people. And in some cases it was just a matter of, we couldn't get to them in time, and our resources are limited, and that kind of thing. But hearing their stories, some people only had just an out-of-body experience for moments, let's say in an operating table or something like that, but that experience was already enough. And the feeling of, detaching from their body and not feeling pain anymore, and being in this like warm light, and feeling love, and all of that feeling and all of that description was enough that they're homesick, and they go through years of depression typically. That's a very kind of typical kind of story for a lot of people who had a near-death experience, and also because they kind of come back that no one's going to believe them, or no one does. And so it's like, they're lonely, and also they miss that place they were in. So, but yeah, to your earlier point, Sandra, we also, because we tried to get as broad as we could with the kind of stories we're telling, and interview as many people as we could. There in our film we include 3 distressing or hellish near-death experiences. And I don't know if that's like a perfect ratio of like of the kinds of experience that are out there, but I mean, we just wanted to be kind of open and honest, and just sharing, the big variety of experiences that people are having, including, there's some people that have in their near-death experience, they go to a place that they might call the void, but for them it's that place, which seems to be almost like descriptively the same as someone who had a distressing near-death experience. For them, it wasn't that. It was the absence of light, but an awareness in a place that exists, that's nothingness, but they're still aware, and they're still themselves in this nothingness. And then it was actually peaceful, and it was almost like this whole, like, not holding place, but almost like this, I don't know, just this gap for a moment. And it was peaceful. And actually there was a few people that we talked to, I don't know that we included in the film, but they felt like almost like a presence, or heard a voice or something, but again, we're only in this void, not seeing anything. So it's really interesting, all these kind of varied, experiences, and we just kind of wanted to explore, what is that variety, what does that look like, and be open and honest about, all these different near-death experiences. It wasn't only, the heaven, or the positive near-death experiences.
Are there any religious undertones to this, or is this kind of open for everybody? Form your own beliefs. Here's the information we've got.
Yeah, well, it's really made for everyone. The thing about death is, I mean, it affects everyone, right? So, um, of course, I grew up as a Christian. My faith was, I think it was renewed after kind of going through, these near-death experiences, and learning about these stories. And I just kind of concluded for myself that I think there is heaven. And that's the hope that I have too, even for my brother-in-law, that I can see him again, which is, that keeps me going, right? That gives me hope. But we don't like, to our earlier point talking about the film, we don't spoon feed anyone in the reality of an afterlife. And so in the same way, the same thing for kind of the religious stuff too. We of course we have people in the film that, they are believers. Not everyone is. But that's not the whole film, because again, it's death affects us all, and we want everyone to kind of come to the table and hear these stories and the science and the data behind it, and kind of draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, good stuff, guys. How can we watch the film? I know I mentioned it in the beginning, but you also have pay it forward. Can we talk about the logistics of people going to see it?
Yeah, so you can go to angel.com/afterdeath, and there you can get tickets. We also have, like you mentioned, we have a paid forward program, which is really cool. It's something kind of new that maybe that's something that Angel does really well. And so if you go to a different URL, angel.com/lifeafter, there you have a page where you can buy tickets. You can also pay it forward for someone else, and the whole purpose behind that is, and we've done it ourselves, even as directors and producers in the film, just kind of making it accessible for people who otherwise can't get to the theater to watch it. And these are real people that do use these free tickets, so they're both paid for by real people, and they're both used by real people. And we've heard from countless people that are very thankful that people have paid it forward. And so we kind of want to keep that going, make it accessible for really everyone to be able to watch the film. So if you can, you go to angel.com/lifeafter. You can pay it forward for as many people as you want. And if you can't watch the film, or you don't have the means to buy a ticket, you can also use that same URL to claim a ticket. You can also claim a ticket from people that have already paid forward.
It sounds so good. You guys have been working your butts off, getting the movie done and now advertising it. What do you guys think is possible if you had a little magic wand and you could be 10 years out in the future to see what might happen out of it?
Season 10 of After Death.
Say that again.
I said season 10 of After Death,
Oh,
the series.
I like it. I've got some
Be
people
amazing.
to interview.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in on that idea. Yeah, our hope is that it blows up, and I mean in a good way, just for that that people find hope, right? And that people kind of begin to ask questions that haven't thought about this before, this reality of life after death. And we know, I mean, even from making this film, there's so many more stories to tell. And yeah, we would love to continue telling more stories. We want to see how the film does.
I
Yeah.
love it. Is anything else you guys want to share before we say goodbye and ask people to go buy a ticket?
Yeah, no, just can't emphasize enough. Pre-sales are such a huge indicator. So if you can, tickets are already on sale, go and find a theater that's local to you. It is what is the strongest indicator for how opening weekend does, which is then the domino for how much longer it's going to be in theaters, how many theaters it's going to be in, what international looks like. So it's a big task to try to get the audiences to go out, buy a ticket now, and and even pay it forward if you feel like there's somebody else in your life that you'd like to bring with you, or pay it forward to.
Thank you. Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I just I hope that this just has an impact on people's lives. That's kind of the real purpose for me making the film. Yeah, I hope people begin to ask questions who haven't thought about it before, but also even for this life that we have here, like if you're beginning to ask questions about the reality of life after death, and if that is real, what could that mean for this life? How could we think about living life differently here? And so, yeah, I just kind of hope it causes reflection, and to our earlier conversation, I hope it just kind of that it does kind of have that impact on culture, and that yeah, more and more people start talking about their near-death experience.
Oh, those are great words. I just want to share one last story with you. In my previous career, before COVID hit, my mom and I owned a lucrative catering business, and we worked with race car teams. It's We fed 1,500 people. We were at Daytona and the big races.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
after
cool.
my book came out, one of the race car drivers came up to me, a bit older, not too old, but he's now a TV announcer. Yeah, Sandra, what's your book about? And he was trying to feel me out if it's okay to tell his story. And then he told me that when he was young, he was in a car accident, rushed to the hospital. He ended up floating above his body, looked down, saw his mom and dad and brother praying for him. In the afterlife, he was greeted by his grandmother and grandfather. And he said they were so real that it made this life seem like just a dream. And he got to choose, and he wanted to come back. He saw them praying for him and he wanted to come back. But he said, Sandra, without that fear of dying, I didn't have a fear of living. So he says, I was able to get in that race car, drive over 200 miles an hour, win a countless amount of championships because it took away his fear of dying. So it's not my idea that people drive that fast, but with the potential of this film, people will still be a little hesitant, as it's normal about dying. But if we know that we truly cannot die, that we go on, who are we and what is our life for? So I'm so grateful that I've gotten to spend this hour and talk to you guys. And let's do it. Let's help people live life to the fullest and reduce some of the fear of dying and help people have relationships that work and good conversation over what's possible all through the film. Thank you both.
Oh,
Thank you so much,
Sa-
Sandra.
Yeah, we're excited for you to see it, and we want a full report after. We want to hear your full review.
I will give it to you. I absolutely will. So Stephen and Jens, thank you for being our guest today. And for our listener or our viewer, thank you so much for giving us your precious time to be with us on this journey. So don't forget, go to angel.com/after death. Check out the film. Pay it forward. Pick up a copy of a couple tickets for yourself, and just enjoy. I do think that this is really going to have this effect of like a snowball effect. And for those of us who might have been a little fearful sharing our belief in the afterlife, maybe this is just the thing. Say, hey, have you heard of this movie? You want to go with me? Your friends and family, and open up a great conversation. You'll find that there's more people that believe and that are open than you think you will. And as a reminder for me, please go to wedon'tdie.com. That's my home base. You can click on the store page, see everything that's coming up. At the bottom of wedon'tdie.com, you'll see my email list. You can join. It says you get the first few chapters of my book, but here's the secret. You get the whole book. I want you to know what I know. Not only that, chapter 10 is about grief. And I think that's the most important chapter, really, to help understand grief and how to move through it to the other side. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. So thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you soon.